Welcome to the Everybody Matters podcast. This show is an outreach of Barry-Wehmiller. Don't forget to connect with us on the web at barry-wehmiller.com, on Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, on Facebook and LinkedIn, and check out our blog, trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart, your host.
I think that humans have always wanted to feel like they were contributing to something that was more than just their own ego, their own personal wealth, to be able to, whether it's through coaching, why would people volunteer to coach kids' sports teams? Why would you volunteer in local community-based organizations? This is to be part of a contribution that's much bigger than you. So I'm so thrilled to see that there's a focus on both individual and company purpose, because what we can achieve, and I think the fulfillment that you feel, is infinitely greater if we can tap into it. As a small child and then growing up into an adult, I really love being able to celebrate people for who they are, individuals, and allowing that freedom and honoring the individual sort of unique superpowers that people bring. And purpose is just sort of hand in glove with that kind of way of working. So I've taken both big organizations and teams and individuals through purpose work, and I've seen it transform their ability to use it as a compass to go home to where they can both feel fulfilled and where they have very distinct superpowers, and then organizations using it as a lens to make choices. And we've talked about individuals. You can either go to work and kind of phone it in, or you can go to work, feel completely lit up inside, and give that discretionary performance that you might not have even known that you had in you. But in there lies creativity and sort of blowing people's hair back. Admittedly, when I came into this work about 8 or 10 years ago, I was personally skeptical. It felt fluffy. I always knew who I was. From the time I was small, I was sort of distinct in the way that I would operate and the things that I enjoyed doing or the ways that I could contribute. So I didn't really understand how this could be transformative. But when I was at Heineken, I suspended disbelief, went along on the journey. I figured there must be something to this if people are talking a lot about it. And what I found is that it is deeply transformational. So I think, one of the headwinds, although less so now because it's so mainstream, is just a belief that this is soft stuff that doesn't really contribute to any kind of organizational accomplishment. I think a lot of organizations have gotten past that now. The other thing is that you have to be intentional about this work, because there's a lot of distraction. There's a lot of noise out there, and you can go chasing after all of these smaller things that really, in the end, don't matter in the mid and long term. So you have to create space. You have to protect this work. You have to allow yourself to swim in the ambiguity of this work for a while until it becomes more clear, because it takes time to do this kind of deep reflection, whether it's individually or organizationally, and to find that shared language, and then to try that on for size and see, okay, I think that was 80% right, but actually there's this other dimension to it. Let me refine that. So it takes work like anything else, but work that is well worth it.
That was Stacey Tank, a vice president with the Home Depot, who was a participant last winter in the Organizational Higher Purpose Conference at the Bauer Leadership Center at Washington University in St. Louis, which has been the basis for this Higher Purpose series here on the Everybody Matters podcast. This is the third part in the series, and Stacey introduced the theme of today, which is getting started. When you look at the purpose of your company, where do you start? Also, is there a difference between your purpose and your mission? Well, let's start off with Nick Craig of the Core Leadership Institute to explain further.
Have any of you seen Michelangelo's David in person? Okay? Will you ever forget it? There's something about seeing this thing when you see it in person that seeing the picture is okay, but when you're in front of it, you're like, okay, this is way better than I thought it was going to be. There's something about it that for me represents the beauty of what purpose is. Now, it turns out that he wasn't actually supposed to do this. The original person who got the opportunity because Florence wanted to celebrate that it had truly made it in the world, was Agostino Duca 11 years before Michelangelo was born. Now, this is the first time in 1,000 years that they were going to try to do something that was this big. And they had to go to a quarry, and they had to get a 25,000-pound piece of marble from the quarry to Florence, which took them 2 years. Think of the Saturn V rocket and trying to move it to Cape Canaveral, and you get an image, except for you only had mules and men. This is like building the pyramids. Now, he reduced the weight of it by carving it at the quarry. The problem is that when it got to Florence and they looked at it, they realized there was no way anything was going to come out of the stone. Number two is there were flaws in the marble. They'd picked the wrong marble, which meant there was nothing that could be done with this stone. It sits for 30 years. It gets rained on, sun, bleached. The marble becomes brittle. Michelangelo, at the age of 26, walks up to the marble, and the quote that's associated with him is, "I saw the angel in the marble, and I carved until I released him." Now, I believe that that piece of marble is every organization, including this university. They all have flaws. And previous people have carved things into it that you're not sure what you're going to do with. And it doesn't make actually creating the miracle that easy at all. Here's one of my biggest insights, is that I have some great technology, and when people call me to fix their organizational purpose stuff, and what I have is the Augusto Duca, who is the original guy who got the gig, and that's what shows up in the room to work on organizational purpose. I get something that sits on the side and looks just as awful as what was, they used to call that big piece of marble before it turned into David, the stone, the giant stone. Okay? And the truth of the matter is if I don't have Michelangelos in the room, I ain't getting nothing good. I don't care what mechanism, what questions you ask, what process you put them through, you get something that is boring and mundane. And when you have people step into their Michelangelo, you get something that will last 500 years. So what I realized is I needed to find the Michelangelo in everybody. Now here's the thing. In each one of us is an Agostino Duca as well as a Michelangelo. And on any given day, we actually have to choose which are we going to step into. And when we step into Michelangelo inside of us and we lead from that place, amazing things happen. And then there's the days that we don't. Okay? So what I've, in some sense, my biggest insight is if I can help you step into your purpose, really, and step into your version of your Michelangelo. And for me, individual purpose is about the unique gift that you bring to the world. Look, if I replaced you with someone as good-looking and smart and attentive as you are in your life, and 3 months later I interviewed everybody and said, what do you most miss? That would be your purpose. Okay? That's your purpose. Challenge is, you don't know what it is. Most of us don't. And if you don't know it, you can't live it. And if you're not living it, you can't lead from it. Okay? And the most challenging part is it's always been there. Just like the David was always in the marble. So, when I ask organizations and I pull people together, this is the core question that if you can't answer it, we're not going to heaven. What would most be missed if your organization disappeared tomorrow? The brutal reality for most organizations, if they disappeared tomorrow, no one would care. Who misses Circuit City? Right? Goes out of business one day to the next. You just go move over to Best Buy. You don't miss a thing. You guys all have your Apple phones. You can argue how much you like them or dislike them, but if they went away tomorrow, you might be slightly challenged. So in some ways, the challenge is Michelangelo answered this question from a place of releasing the angel. Duca answered it by having this thing sit on the side for 30 years. This is the challenge for me. You cannot separate organizational purpose from the purpose of those people who are there to create it or lead it.
You're now going to hear from Marc Braun and John Kramer of Cambridge Engineering. You might recognize those names as they've appeared on our podcast before, but this is kind of a case study in creating a purpose statement. So here's Marc and John.
11 years ago, I got invited by this man to join the team, and you invited me with purpose. And so I just thought it would be good for them to hear your heart for what does purpose mean to you, and how did that get into your head?
Okay, well, real quick, Cambridge Engineering is a manufacturing company. We make built-to-order HVAC technology for large industrial commercial spaces, and we ship throughout North America. So I took over as president in 2005, second-generation family business. And I was trained, my father said, you run the business and you take care of your people and you pay your people fairly and you'll do well. And then you use the profits to give back or give to the community organization. And along that way, several years after I've been president, a friend of mine gave me a book. It's a beer book, On Search of God in Guinness, the beer that changed the world. And that really blew my mind. And if you look at Arthur Guinness in the late 1800s, he was a man that cared about his culture, Irish culture. And he developed Guinness beer as a healthy alternative to gin. And the major problem with gin and alcoholism and all, and they didn't have a lot of water, it was stagnant. But the second thing he did was when other companies, as he grew, he was in downtown Ireland, Dublin, and as other companies grew, they would start out greenfielding it and build whole new industrial towns somewhere else. In Guinness, Arthur said, we're going to stay here in the city because we're in the city and we're going to impact our city. The third thing that was impactful for me was that he came out and Dublin had the highest mortality rate of any industrialized city in the world at that time. And he found out one of the problems was hygiene. And he was actually the first company in the West to actually ever hire a doctor and sent that doctor to every employee's home to teach them hygiene. So that was the first time I had actually saw a business that can actually do something for people, rather just run it and make a profit and treat people fairly. So that was my experience. That became part of my journey.
Yeah, and when you sat down with me, we were friends before, and he sat down with me 11 years ago and he said, I really want to build a growth-based company and hold on to all those beautiful values that you hear coming out from you every time. And one thing that was clear was that his vision was very, very large. He wanted to change the world. He said it about 1,000 different ways. Many of them were all over the place, but I knew it was big. And I knew that he said he wanted to grow. And I asked him a question. I said, most people in family businesses say they want to grow, but they don't do what it's necessary to actually grow. Most people in the world that I've met say they want to grow, and they don't do the things necessary. And I asked him, I said, are you willing to do the things necessary? Are you willing to change yourself and the things that are holding back the growth of the company? And that was 11 years ago. He said yes, full-heartedly. He said yes. And we've been together 11 years. I love working for you and with you to further the mission, your vision that you have. He continues to say yes. The thing that's hard is that the things we're changing today are harder than the things he changed 11 years ago. They're deeper inside. They're really, really hard to change. And I end up having to do that same thing that I asked him to do, so I end up having to change myself. And then the team has to end up doing that same work. And so to live a purpose-driven company is not easy. To be able to live up to the standards of what it looks like to live out your purpose out in front, so everybody sees actually what you're claiming to do. This has become a vision of what we share with the company. We want people growth. We had to write those values down and to understand them. And this has been a mantra for us. It's just this image put up, a healthy tree. We want it to be grown with people growth and organizational health leading to healthy business growth. So we actually would like paced growth. We would love to be able to grow leaders, and then those leaders to grow the business. And that starts with John growing himself, me growing myself, and then everybody else that joins the team. They have to actually end up growing themselves to grow the organization. We did end up writing down what growth looks like, because he said he wants to grow, and sometimes it would be 40% and sometimes it would be 120% per year, but always it was aggressive. And so we ended up setting a growth goal of 15% annual growth goal with 12% operating profit. It's really cool, the team that has joined on this mission. And so we have delivered that result over the last 7 years, compounded annually. Thank you, Bob Chapman, whoever gives the CAGR, which is fun to say. So business results actually matter, so we can reinvest in the business. Talk to me about the advantage, and how did that come into your world, our world?
Part of the journey is I'm a big Patrick Lencioni fan, and he was speaking in St. Louis, and I was actually responsible for him that day. And that was actually the same month, 2010, that he released that book. So I brought 15 or 20 of my teammates, overwhelmed the auditorium with big people, a lot of people, and just wanted to expose them to something what I saw. And here, organizational health trumps everything in business. People do, I know that, but it's hard. I'm so used to product and management and doing things, but really I wanted a healthy organization, and I look back and celebrate that. So that's how we got to meet Patrick.
I just think about John's statement about how hard it was. Patrick says to start with writing down why you exist, and then how you behave, and then what do you do for customers, and then how will you succeed, and what's most important right now, and who does what. That's the 6 questions, just like John had mentioned. You got to be able to answer those questions and be able to articulate them well. And do you remember how long it took us to write down the why we exist?
We put some placeholders in place, why we exist. All good, great companies are customer focused, right? And so that. And we just come out. I proved my father wrong. He said, you sell high energy efficient product, and you can always make money in a recession. And we had 2009 came, and I lost $1.6 million. So we was like, that wasn't really the best way. But
and I came in to grow it that year.
So just learning from that, but getting clarity of what we're doing. And so I had to put a placeholder. Placeholder is like, okay, make a profit and grow people. And so just something while we're trying to figure this out and meeting together with different teams.
So he would write down a why we exist statement, and I would go in there and I'm like, that's not why I'm here. And the other executives would be like, that's not why we're here. And so we would go back to the drawing board. We would sit it there for a year. And John said he left his blank. That would have been helpful if we left it blank. But we put in just different answers, right? We would just put in a different answer. And we ended up 4 years in, and we've got the team. And I've had off-sites with John where I'm just, tears are coming to my eyes, because I joined this organization because of this, because of why we exist. And every one of them felt lightweight and insincere. They were out of good heart, but they didn't resonate. And so we ended up writing down a why we exist statement. The team did. And the team was real strong because it had been building, and we had been doing the other things well in strategy and execution, all that stuff. And we ended up writing down, we exist to glorify God by enriching the quality of every life that we touch. And everybody looked at each other and they're like, yep, that's it. We're like, that's really scary. I knew it was big because I got scared to death that we would write it down. And John, I could see some of the tears that we had before were, we can't do that. You can't do that. Obviously, you can't write that down in business, just so you know. Does everybody know that? Don't write that one down. But John had lived out a faith in a loving something that he called God that was big. And it was like, this guy's following something that's really big, and I'm here, I'm willing, I'm able. And not everybody had the same definition or the same religion or the same words, but it was definitely bigger than anything that we had ever seen. And when we wrote it down, we got scared. And I knew we were on the right track because it was why I was there. That was why I was there. I don't go into organizations, 5 years is a long stint for me. I'm there 11 years, and I can't imagine not being there for the next 20 because there's no way we'll ever achieve that. And so inspiration from people in this room and elsewhere, and just allowing us to not settle until we were ready to write it down. We didn't share it with the organization immediately. We lived it. And what's fun is we've been able to see if they resonate with it, and the people inside can understand it. And they're like, now, does that mean if I'm an atheist, I can't work here? No, that doesn't mean that. Does that mean if I'm a Muslim? No, come on, we love that. Are you feeling enriched? The quality of your life, is your life enriched by your presence here? And are you interested in enriching the quality of others? And the answer has been a resounding yes from everybody there. And so it's been really fun to expand that to the clients and expand that to our vendors. How we behave, we ended up writing that one down too, and we took a couple stabs at it. Do you have that one?
That was also a journey, but ultimately through several years, I can name more books. I can name books all day, but Cambridge, we behave with unconditional love and high expectations, with care, courage, integrity, and respect. And I could talk, a long time, but finding that unconditional love is like, okay, I got to have that. I got teenagers. You got to always have that. But it's like, how can we use love in the workplace and really care for people, and also have the ability to, you're just not a fit for our organization. You need to be repotted outside the organization. So doing it with love.
And I think we had many people, just like the God statement, to say that love is not the word you should use because it's a really, really big, hard thing. And I can tell you, if I wake up as the president and try to grow 15% top line, 12% operating profit every single day, and have to execute that with unconditional love for every single person that steps into our doors or gets in touch with us, or we fire, or we hire, or we decide to use their product or we don't, it's a tough job. And so I know that I have to grow as a leader to be able to live up to that. It is something that I actually want to do, but it's really hard, and we know we can't do it perfectly. I think we had to end up building the culture into the daily habits. So we had to actually look at every one of our daily rituals. I have to sleep every single day, or else I actually start to get really tired. Does anybody else have that problem? You have to sleep every day? Well, so that's the same mentality we've used for our cultural ideas. What does it look like to change our cultural daily habits that match up to this big old purpose and how we behave? What daily habits can we instill in each group and each rhythm that actually matches up to that? So we've got two of them that I'll share with you, morning meeting and lean and clean. Our morning meeting is a 15-minute ritual, and every single person is there. If you're there, you're there. And we stand up. A different person leads it every single day, which is shared distributed leadership. It shows courage, one of the core values, to lead the whole organization. 80 people out of 160 have volunteered to lead. It is a volunteer thing. But I'll tell you what, public speaking is the biggest fear in the world. And if we could just rid our companies, our individuals inside our organizations of that one fear, if you could just rid the people inside your organizations of that one fear, which is public speaking, it would change your company and change the world. It's the largest fear, and we've got 80 people who are into manufacturing, and they're leading the whole company in there. One of the things, this is a slide we put up every day. Tell them what this is.
So pass the microphone around. Start out the meeting by saying, does anybody have something that they're grateful? And we pass the microphone, grateful appreciation for. So we've had people stand up and say, hey, Mike helped me understand more of my job. I'm new at this, and they stayed and had patience with me. Or Jimmy came over and helped me install my hot water heater that night. It could be family, it could be work-related, but it's something that we're grateful for.
And this has been probably the biggest change in my life. If I start the day with an attitude of gratitude or lenses that there's gratefulness, it changes everything about how I lead. Every part of my life, every time I enter the house, every time I enter any place that I serve, on a board, if I enter with gratitude as the filter, and this is in front of our employees every single day, and people get to share what they're grateful for. And so that's a daily ritual and a daily habit.
Lastly, here's a roundtable discussion with more nuts and bolts of creating a purpose statement for your company. Features all the folks that you've heard from so far, and it's hosted by Stuart Bunderson of the Bauer Leadership Center, who you heard on the last episode of the podcast. His voice you'll hear first, followed by Nick Craig, then John Kramer, Stacey Tank, then you'll hear from John Kemper of Commerce Bank Shares, and then Marc Braun.
So let's start with this one. How do you know when you're there? Who would like to take a crack at that one?
I'll take a crack because I think you did a great job. My experience is when you're in the room and it shows up, in your bones you know. Because there's this kind of, it happens in the room. Because it connects to this deep part of us. The other thing is that immediately after that, you get scared to death. Because you go, oh, shit, yeah. Because you realize the minute you wake up, you also realize what the score is. And you realize the distance between where you are now and what you've just created is this amazing gap. And you're like, oh, brother, this is going to take some work. So it's both of those, when you have both the joy and being scared at the same time is usually when purpose is in the room.
That's how I would say it. I would just agree. That's where I found it.
Yeah. And plus you have to be bald.
The combination of joy and fear. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Well, the culture, the people, when you bring it out to them, they affirm it. You know, they say, that's not us. But you know, you soft throw it out there. But when people say, that's it, they own it, you know, that gives you the joy, and then it's like, oh my gosh, now what? You know, and work to do. But it's fun.
Maybe one other build too. We did the same work. We didn't talk about it today, but we did the same work at Home Depot a few years ago. And we didn't write a purpose statement. We had a purpose emerge. So we talked to 20,000 customers and we talked to thousands of associates, and we took their words. So then when we showed them back, they said, those are our words. What do you mean if this is right? Yes, it's right. We told you. You know, that's in our language. So that helped.
Fabulous. Well, let's then go to this one here. We had the question, okay, what is the difference between a mission and purpose? Are these the same thing for you? Do you think about these differently? Does anyone want to take a crack at that? Stacey, looks like you're...
Yeah, sure. So we have a couple of things that we've framed. The first one is how do we behave? How do we expect people to behave? And those are our values. We have a values wheel. We have 8 values. We measure every employee. We have 500,000 employees, third largest employer in the United States. We measure everyone against the values twice a year formally. So nothing else. We cannot proceed unless we're really living those values. And you'll go to a meeting, every other meeting, I hear someone mention a value. It's very entrenched. So how do we expect people to behave? We also talk about what are we going to deliver. So we have specific targets that might be, let's call it 1 year, 3 year kind of targets. We have a question that we answer around vision. Where are we going? And right now that has to do with creating more of a seamless customer experience between the physical and digital world, called One Home Depot. That's a vision, the dot on the horizon. And then why do we exist is the 4th question. And that has to do with empowering the doer in all of us. That's our language. So we actually don't talk about mission. That's not one that we've gone after.
Yeah, it's just not a word that you guys necessarily use. But if you did, it would probably, you guys use the circle, you know, Y in the middle, right? Is that where mission would go? I mean, is that kind of,
well, I think John had a good answer for this.
For us, not so much. And we wrestled with that. But it was a very liberating thing for us to break apart mission and purpose, because I think it gave us the space to make purpose aspirational and more from the heart, and then gave us the space within mission to talk about how you're actually going to do that. Right? If our mission is to help people focus on what matters most, that doesn't say much about what we actually do as an institution. And I think a lot of people were hungry for, okay, well, how do we tie that articulation back to like what I'm doing in a given day? And that's where mission came in. So we're going to do it by offering A, B, C, and D, helping to figure out what your challenges are and solving those challenges.
Interesting.
I think one of the challenges in the world is that this language is it's all mixed together. And you know, there's about 18 different definitions of purpose in the room as well. Purpose in some ways, I went to a conference like this and someone said, we need a different set of words because they all don't mean the same. You say, what's the purpose of this meeting means something very different than what is your purpose, okay? Yeah, so in some ways, when I look at a mission statement, I say, well, is this a purpose or is this a mission? So Lego's purpose, one of my clients I get to play with, is literally is to create the builders of tomorrow. And I go, that's a purpose statement. Okay? True and true, right? And then I go work with somebody else and they say, our purpose is to create financial sustainability, blah, blah, blah. And I go, okay, that's a mission statement. And you can feel it when it's a purpose. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think in some sense, it's like you can trust your gut with a purpose statement versus a mission.
So one of the things that I'm hearing in these examples that you're all giving is that the purpose is almost independent of what you do as a company. In every one of these examples, it doesn't necessarily tell you what you do as a company, but the mission starts to bring that in. Would that be?
Yeah, mission is about the do.
Okay.
Yeah, and we just have so many people that have tried vision, mission. If you've been around any long, you just have gotten sick and tired of it. I mean, it just feels like, I don't want to do another one of them. Because you get to a long thing that nobody cares about. That's how it's viewed in so many of our people's, they're like, I don't want to do it. And so it's actually gotten a negative connotation. Why we exist hasn't yet. And so you can ask different questions and get the same core thing.
Excellent.
Can I go back for a second to
Yes,
the timeline and the how do you know when you get there? Maybe try to bring those questions together because I don't have a good answer for it, so I'm wondering what else the people at the table think. Because for us, this started in like June of 2013. We were doing a culture workshop meeting. There was an hour left at the end of the long day, and we said, okay, now we're going to do purpose. Okay? We didn't quite get there. And then we had a few false starts, and we got to something that I thought was pretty good, actually. I was behind it, and if I like it, it must be great, right? Nah, it kind of fell flat with the team. And then I think in earnest, we and I'm looking at Bob Holmes, who I work with, who's in the room, we really started on this maybe 18 months ago. And I think we tempered our expectations a little bit to say, okay, it's not necessarily going to be lightning in a bottle coming out of this room, but we're going to make forward progress, and there's value in that. Now, at the very end, I'm extremely jealous of the Heineken moment where you're all high-fiving around the room, and you captured that lightning in a bottle, because I think for us, we got like 90% of the way there. We workshopped the hell out of this thing. But you're never going to, at least what the conclusion I came to is we're never going to get totally there with like the 150 people in that big room that we had workshopping it. And so that last 10% of the way, for me, was about getting our senior leadership team to really get behind this thing and really be passionate about it, and then go be evangelists for it. And because the energy, you need to have the energy behind it too,
Yep,
right?
exactly.
We're great at, I mean, we're underwriting credit all day, right? So what we sit around is look for kind of the things that could go wrong, like the flaws, right? That's just in our DNA a little bit. So we really needed to kind of take that leap of faith as a leadership team, and that's what got us to done. But maybe that's a little bit different experience than what you guys have seen, when you know that you have it.
When you guys came up with yours, what happened?
Well, I think the difference is, I mean, you guys have a bunch of risk protectors,
Yeah.
and we have a bunch of risk takers. I mean, John is one of the biggest risk takers I've ever seen. He will take, necessary risks, and so that it's risky to write it down. And so, we felt it, but I think it's just that might just be who's in the room and how they're wired.
Sure.
Okay, so last question before we take a break. I think we need to, what wouldn't you do again? Let's talk about some of those. Are there things you learned looking back that you would say, that probably we would not do if we had it to do over again? I don't know. Stacey?
Sponsorship at the top of the organization is really, really important. And there was a moment when I was working for our CEO at Home Depot where he wasn't ready to do it. It wasn't the right time based on the other things that we wanted to tackle and in which order. So the executive support really matters, because if the leader isn't bought in, the top team won't be bought in, it sort of doesn't work. So timing was important, and we had to be patient and thoughtful. And then when the time was right for us to dive in, we were ready to, we were like shot out of a cannon, ready to go.
On the Heineken example, the big mistake we made, and it was like the biggest oh no moment on the 3 or 4 days we were together, is the top team's in front of the room, and they said, and here's our first version of what we came up with. Oh, that was the biggest mistake. Because everybody in the room went, well, you figured it out. Okay, what are we here for? And then I sort of said, you have to rip it up. And the CEO's like, no, I really like this one. You have to rip it up. He says, rip it up in front of everybody and say, you give this thing up. We have to burn it. If we have to burn it, we burn it. Because they have to have the chance to create this thing together, and they have to feel like they can own it, and that they don't have to, if they take some of it, great, but you have to, and the rest of the time, he's like, no, I said, stop, just let them, and that was the biggest mistake we made, is that we needed to just trust that they were gonna figure it out. And trusting when you get everybody together, and then on day 3 at 5 o'clock, they're all gonna leave, is an interesting place to be. But welcome to the show, right?
Thanks for listening to the Everybody Matters podcast. If you'd like to find out more about Bob Chapman and Ross Zodia's book, Everybody Matters, The Extraordinary Power of Caring for Your People Like Family, go to everybodymattersbook.com. For updates on the book, this podcast, and for a lot of great content and insight, don't forget to connect with us on the web at Barry-Wehmiller.com, on Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, on Facebook and LinkedIn, and check out our blog, trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart. Thanks for listening. And don't forget, Everybody Matters is the only business idea with truly unlimited potential. Take care.